Welcome, everybody, to the next installment of NHA's In Conversation With series. Today, I'm super excited to get to talk to Mike Mortimer, research scientist from Dewey Scientific. Welcome, Mike, and tell us a little bit about yourself and Dewey Scientific.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to come talk to you. I really appreciate it. I think we have something exciting to talk about. Yeah, I am a molecular biologist by training here at Dewey Scientific. I have been working in the area of plant genetics for 30 plus years and have recently, and I'd say in the last 2 years, moved over into the hemp cannabis world of plant genetics. So that's sort of where I am personally. At Dewey Scientific, basically, we are a cannabis research company. We're located in Pullman, Washington, on the east side of the state. So, as a company, if I want to talk about Dewey Scientific, what we do, we really are interested in bringing cannabis and cannabis research sort of in line with all of the major crops like corn, wheat, soybean, rice, for example, because over the years, so much federal money has poured into funding research into those crops, and cannabis has been sorely neglected. Despite the fact that in 2021, cannabis was the fourth most valuable crop in the U.S.
Wow. Actually, I did not even know that. But today we are here to talk about hemp in space. And as soon as I had the pleasure of talking to you previously a little bit about this, and I was like, we have to do an in conversation with and talk about this project because, well, I mean, hemp in space, like how cool does that sound? And then after getting to talk to you, like, yeah, it's actually as cool as it sounds. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the project and why hemp?
Sure. So we have been given the opportunity, a truly amazing opportunity, to conduct a hemp growth experiment on the International Space Station. And we are, at this point in time, currently looking for funding partners to join us in this sort of once-in-a-lifetime experience. And what we aim to do is to grow six hemp plants from seed to maturity in the microgravity environment of the space station. Briefly, we will work directly with the astronauts and the folks at NASA to grow the plants and then harvest the flowers, after which they will be brought back to us here at Dewey Scientific, and we'll analyze them to understand how the microgravity environment of space affects the plants themselves. Interestingly, the mission is actually called Hemp, H-E-M-P. Every good NASA mission has to have an acronym. And so this one stands for... Any
government thing has to have an acronym.
Indeed, it does. And this is Hemp Experiments in Microgravity Project. And if I might be able to share a screen with you, I'll show you the mission patch. We have a mission patch. Oops. Did I share?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. This is the mission patch. You can see that we describe everything here that we're after. We're after looking at cannabinoids and terpenes on the space station. And so that's our exciting mission patch. Every mission has to have one of those.
Yeah, so maybe the astronauts will see them with a little patch on their spacesuit one day with this on it.
Exactly. Certainly it will be part of the mission, and that's for sure.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But you asked why hemp. And it's actually a really easy question to answer. And that's because hemp is, as you guys know, one of the most remarkable and versatile plants in existence. As a plant geneticist, I can think of no other plant that is as useful and versatile as hemp, as cannabis, from things like hemp fiber textiles, rope, to building materials like the new developed hempcrete, all the way to ethanol fuels, like from the fermentation of the stalks, to hemp oil and food from the seeds and so on. But for this mission, this experiment on the space station, we are going to focus on the trichomes, which are the oil-filled glands on the hemp flower. And I thought that I would show you the picture here. This shows a picture of a full bud on the left panel, completely covered in trichomes. So it's the frostiness on the flower itself. On the right panel, you see, absolutely full of resin, full of oil. And on the right panel, you can see those trichomes, those stalked bulbous trichomes on the right. Oops. And the reason we're interested in the trichomes is the oil that's contained within those trichomes, okay, contain all of the industrial and medically important compounds that we know and love, such as the cannabinoids, right? CBD, the CBC, the CBG, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, there are over 150 identified cannabinoids in cannabis, okay? But we are particularly interested in some of the rare cannabinoids, some of the what are called varins and phorols. So, for example, a CBD-V, cannabidiol varin, for example, or a cannabidiol phorol. These are cannabinoids that are not as highly expressed, but they are there. And we know, obviously, that some of the cannabinoids are effective in treating various ailments and diseases. In fact, doctors and hospitals use cannabinoids today, right? Epidiolex, which is CBD, is used to treat Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which of course is a very severe form of childhood epilepsy. Marinol, which is actually synthetic delta-9 THC, okay, and that's used to treat nausea in patients that are receiving chemotherapy. Then, you know, the other one that I know of course, is Sativex, which is an oral spray, which is a mixture of CBD, THC, other cannabinoids, and probably terpenes for the treatment of the MS symptoms. And these compounds from cannabis work because we know that the cannabinoids can and do interact with the CB1 and the CB2 receptors in the brain and the body of humans. In fact, all mammals. So,
and that's what we commonly call the endocannabinoid system.
Correct. And so it you know, you ask why hemp? Well, it stands to reason then that with over 150 cannabinoids identified in cannabis, that there are others that have yet to be discovered, right?
Yes.
Which may be able to treat other diseases and other conditions. So that's one reason that has sort of inspired us to work in the space environment. But
why space? Okay, so that's a good why hemp, but
absolutely. And if I may give you the other reason why hemp, okay, there are two reasons that we're after. There's another class of compounds that is also abundant in trichomes that we are interested in, and those are the terpenes. Okay. And the terpenes are a class of compounds in plants, all plants, okay, that contribute to those wonderful aromas that we smell, okay? And for example, like let's say you walk into a pine forest and you smell that aroma that you're so familiar with. Well, that is coming primarily from the terpene called pinene. Another one is called limonene, which is what you smell when you peel open an orange or a lemon. Okay, that's citrus aroma. Things like lavender, linalool, another terpene. And literally there are thousands of these that exist. Okay? But what makes cannabis such a good source of terpenes is that up to 30% of the dry weight of the flower is that oil, okay? And we're not after it for the aroma part of it, because what makes these compounds just as remarkable as the aroma part of it, that these terpenes can be used as high energy renewable carbon neutral biofuels, okay? And we sort of believe here at Dewey that this is sort of an untapped source of biofuels that either can be used directly, okay, as a fuel, or it can be blended into fuels. And that is a real untapped potential that we believe needs to be investigated.
That
Um,
that's
yeah.
amazing. Like, yeah, when I heard that, I was like, wow, I had no idea. And so is cannabis in general, as you said, it's a good portion of the weight of the plant is the terpenes. Um,
And it's the oils, the full oils, the cannabinoids, the terpenes, and some other compounds.
right. So what is the so is there, do we know how many different types of terpenes can be found in cannabis? Is it different by varietal? Like some are stronger and others, and are all terpenes created equal when it comes to the biofuels?
No, they're not. In fact, let me show you the next slide if I can. This is a great descriptor here, and this sort of answers your question. This is a graph compiled from a study that was done, and in the green bars are some of the terpenes, I should say. Okay, and on the you can see that the bars represent the specific energy of those compounds in megajoules per kilogram of material. So notice that the specific energy of the terpenes are equal to or higher than the common fuels, ethanol, diesel, and even jet A1 fuel, or what we know as aviation fuel. This is mind-blowing to a lot of people, okay? Right? And so you can see how this is a sort of an untapped source of biofuels that we are only now beginning to study, because prior to this, we were unable to study cannabis, right?
Right.
So we're really interested in fleshing this out. And one way to do that, believe it or not, is by growing plants in space. And I know that was your next question.
Yeah, it's yeah. Why space? What's space have to do with it?
Yeah. I get that question all the time. I get the question, why hemp, and why hemp in space?
Yeah, it can't just be because it sounds so cool.
Exactly. It is very cool, but boy, there are some really great reasons. So it's sort of well known that space is a stressful environment for all of terrestrial life, right? In none of our evolutionary history has gotten us ready to live in space in a microgravity environment. And when we're talking about plants in particular, we have to remember that plants cannot get up and run and remove themselves from a stressful environment, right? Makes sense. Whether it be from a bacterial infection or a fungus or a virus, or even an herbivore like a caterpillar chewing on its leaf, the plants can't get up and run away. So what they have done is they have built into their biology sort of an arsenal of biochemical plant defense mechanisms that allows them to stand and fight, if you will. Okay. So now, previous experiments on the space station, okay, studying a plant called Arabidopsis, which is, a model plant for research, which is sort of the guinea pig of the plant research world. That experiment showed that when Arabidopsis is grown in space, it senses a full systemic stress, and it ends up turning on or upregulating all of its plant defense genes, or a large amount of them, right? Because that's what it has to do, because it can't get up and leave. It can't remove itself from the stress. So now fast forward to hemp. As I mentioned before, the female flower is completely covered in these oil-filled glands called trichomes. And well, guess what those trichomes and oils and the compounds contained within them are used for? Plant defense. Okay. So it stands to reason then that in hemp, we could see global changes in the production of the compounds produced within the trichomes, the cannabinoids, the terpenes, in ways that we can't see on Earth. Okay, so we'll be doing things like looking for novel genetic control mechanisms, such as enhancers, upregulated genes, and pathways of some of the underrepresented compounds, and perhaps some interesting new terpenes or some rare cannabinoids. We could even find genes that were unknown to us prior to growing them in space. Is a sort of a funny, in those previous plant experiments that I talked about involving Arabidopsis, there were stress response genes that were unknown until the plants were grown in space. And this set of unknown genes has been dubbed the unknown-ome. It's sort of like the set of genes that nobody knew about prior to that, which is really kind of funny. Mm-hmm. So that's how we think space will help pull back the curtain, if you will, on some of the hidden physiology of the plant.
Right. So there's real world implications for figuring out if it does overexpress some of these terpenes and cannabinoids, and it's also offering the possibility for you to discover brand new ones that haven't been previously known. So that's exciting on multiple fronts.
On multiple fronts. And our hypothesis is sound, right? Because previous experiments have shown that those genes that are involved in plant defense are upregulated. Well, we have a part of the plant which produces all these wonderful compounds that we know and love. That is a plant defense response. That is a plant defense mechanism, both physical and chemical. So we can anticipate, or we hypothesize, that those compounds will be changed, or the genetics and physiology will be changed in some way that we can, again, unveil some of that hidden physiology that we hope to find.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was the process you had to go through to get approval to do this experiment? I can't imagine you just like call NASA and say, hey, I have an idea. And they're like, oh yeah, like grow hemp in space. Like there had to be some process you went through to get that approval, which sounds pretty impressive.
Yeah. So the process is starts out like any scientific proposal. We write a pre-proposal, and once that is accepted, a large proposal to what's called the ISS National Lab. And they have a managerial arm, which is called CASIS, which stands for the Center for the Advancement of Science in Space. And like I said, it started with a pre-proposal, moved on to a full proposal. And what acceptance of that means is that we have permission to conduct the experiment on the ISS. Okay, so our proposal was in combination with our implementation partner. Okay, the proposal and their proposal, along with ours, is to build a plant growth facility on the ISS. And this proposal was awarded. Okay. So when it came down to flying hemp, the most important thing was that it is hemp, okay? That it is 0.3% THC or lower, okay, to be considered industrial hemp. And as you know, of the 2018 Farm Bill, hemp is considered a perfectly legal agricultural product. So when they saw that this is what we were planning on doing, they said, this sounds like a great experiment. Have at it. And so we got permission.
Did multiple countries have to sign off on that, or was it basically a U.S. decision and the legality in the U.S. was sort of the deciding factor that this was okay?
Yeah. That gets complicated. And to solve that problem, the plants will stay on the U.S. side. Okay. So the idea here is that when the plants are grown on the station, they will be secured in the U.S. owned modules. Okay, and so that solves any of those international problems.
Interesting. I didn't realize there was compartments of the space station that we had. No, that's another super interesting aspect of this. So you mentioned about developing the system to grow the plants, because obviously in space, like there has to be special, you can't just, you know, put a pot of dirt in there and water it and everything's fine. So what did you have to go through to figure out how to do this?
Right. So let me just start out by saying that on my first trip to the Kennedy Space Center, I was speaking to Howard Levine, who is one of the NASA chief scientists involved in ISS research. And he told me, he said, Mike, you can just take everything you know about growing plants on the ground and just toss it out the window. There is nothing conventional about growing plants in space. And I quickly found out that he was very, very right. You know, first of all, you don't have a lot of room on the space station to do this work, right? You don't have a whole laboratory, a whole greenhouse. And so what we had to do to solve that problem at Dewey, we developed through classical breeding techniques, a miniature auto-flowering CBD plant. Okay, and what I mean by that is it's miniature in that it's at full maturity. It only reaches about 24 inches tall. So it can, you know, you can grow a few plants in a very, very small area. The other thing that the plant is an autoflower, which means it does not require 12 hours of dark in order to trigger flowering. Normally, cannabis requires 12 hours of dark, 12 hours of light to trigger flowering. Okay, but if you have an auto-flowering variety, it doesn't require that. In fact, it starts to flower just about 3 weeks after the seed is germinated. So that allows us to get to a fully mature plant in 70 days, okay, as opposed to 4 months. And so that's another thing that we had to consider. The third thing was that it's a CBD plant, that it is industrial hemp, okay, meaning that it's less than 0.3% THC. Okay, so those are the three criteria that we had to meet, or that we wanted to get to in order to sort of even make this experiment possible. But as you alluded to, there are other challenges, many other challenges. First one is that the plants need to be started from seed, okay, on the space station. So you can imagine you can't grow a plant or start it growing on the ground, pack it up into a rocket capsule, and then blast it off to the space station. It's, first of all, it's too violent, okay? The plants wouldn't survive. Two, there's not enough space in the capsule to have a started growing plant. And three, you never know if the plant, if the launch is going to be scrubbed, or it's going to be delayed for a month, and your experiment could be packed up, right, in that small space. So you have to have the experiment ready to go, but not initiated. And so, that's one of the challenges, okay? The second is, what kind of growth vessel, as you alluded to, do you grow your plants in? Okay, you can't just have an open pot of soil or some other medium and just float all over the place. You can't have that. So it has to be all contained. The third, okay, another challenge is, how do you water your plants? You're not going to be going around with a decanter, you know, watering your plants. The water, of course, will just float everywhere. So everything has to be contained. And if I can move on to the next slide here, I have, let's see here. Oops. This is what's called PONS. And PONS, of course, is an acronym. It stands for Passive Orbital Nutrient Delivery System. And the you can see that it's extremely high tech, just as any NASA device would be. And in it, on the left, you see how it has a reservoir for the water to fill in the bottom there. And that sort of cupcake-like holder is where the substrate for the plant. And that's all sealed up. And you'll notice the tubes that are running to it. Those tubes are where the water is delivered into the reservoir to keep the plant growing, to deliver the nutrients to the plant while it's on the station. On the right-hand side, you can see this is a current study here at Dewey Scientific using the pond system. That this is a 35-day hemp in ponds. And so the first thing we had to do was to make sure that the plant that we wanted to work with can actually grow in this environment. And we were pleasantly surprised to see that we could actually go from seed to fully mature plant with fully ripe trichomes, expressing all of the cannabinoids and all of the terpenes in a plant that's 70 days old. So
this might be a stupid question, but if it's sealed to keep the dirt from floating away, like there has to be a hole in it, I guess it's for the plant to come out. Like how does the sprout get through whatever it is that's holding the soil down?
Yeah. So on the very top of the right hand of the ponds device, where the plant is coming out of the ponds, is what's called hydrophobic open cell foam. And again, it is also very high tech. It's been treated with a chemical that makes it super hydrophobic. So water does not penetrate the pores of the foam itself. Okay. But the seed can move through it and then grow up like a normal plant.
Wow.
And you have to remember, there's no gravity. So the plant does not know which way is up, okay, in terms of its gravity vector. But it does know which way it is when you provide it a light. So there are two ways that plants know which way to grow. One is the gravity vector. Oh, I see. Roots go down, shoots go up. That's how we operate on planet Earth. If you don't have that, the plants can still orient themselves normally, believe it or not, but they do that using where the light is coming from.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So where is the light coming from?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we were working with an aerospace company called Redwire Space. And the reason that we're working with them is there's one reason why we're working with Redwire, and that is that they are the implementation partner, meaning they are the intermediary between the scientists on Earth and the astronauts and the facilities on the space station. I like to give the silly example. As a scientist with my experiment, I can't just show up on launch day with a cardboard box with my experiment in it saying, hey, can you put this on a capsule? I want to get this to the space station. It doesn't happen that way. It's very complex. It's full of different entities and groups of people that have to be there to make this happen. And the implementation partner is the aerospace company that knows how to do that. So they are producing what is called the Redwire greenhouse, which is shown here. It is essentially a high-tech version of a small growth chamber, and in it you can see a representative of Pond's hardware sort of locked into the base plate of the greenhouse. And up above on the top is an LED light fixture in which you can fine-tune it to any color of light spectrum you want, okay? More red, more blue, whatever you want in order to get your particular plant to grow. And here at Dewey, we have already been through the process of defining exactly what that spectrum should look like to get our plants to grow the best they can in that 70-day window. So this is the growth chamber, and Redwire has done an amazing job of creating this where it folds down into this small package so it can be put on the capsule, okay, and taken to the space station all intact. When it happens is when it gets there, the astronauts will remove it, unfurl it, get all the power up and running, and then initiate the grow by injecting a nutrient solution into the pond's hardware. That will germinate the plants and they'll start to grow.
So the seed will already be in the ponds when it goes up, and they'll just add the nutrients in the first flush of water to make it germinate?
Correct. That's the way it will happen. It's pretty straightforward. There are ways, there are, in the pond's hardware, there are what are called catmat fins that are very absorbent. And those fins will move the water from the reservoir into the substrate, which is a clay particulate called arsenite. And that will go from the water will go from the reservoir to the catmat fins into the clay arsenite, reach the seed, and it will start to germinate and grow. And then will orient itself by the direction from which the light is coming.
Wow. It's just completely amazing. And so when can this potentially happen?
Yeah. Well, we're at the point where we are doing all of the ground-based definition studies. And what that means is we have to develop and define the experiment here on Earth at Dewey Scientific in a way that is exactly how we want it to happen on the space station, right? We have to make sure that the lighting is right, that the plants grow in ponds, that they fit inside the growth chamber, that the way we have to deliver the water into the ponds works, okay? Which is all done through big hypodermic syringes, believe it or not. And so we have to define exactly what the experiment looks like here on Earth. That's called the definition phase. The next step is to take this defined experiment that we have done over and over again at Dewey and take it to Kennedy Space Center, where we will replicate the experiment in the hands of the folks over at NASA, okay, or Redwire. And that's because we have been doing it for a year or two and we've been defining the experiment, but we know it. We want to have somebody else do it. And so they replicate the experiment there with their hardware, with their lights and so on. Okay. And if that succeeds, if that passes, then it moves on to what's called EVT, or the experimental verification test. So it's the same as the science verification test that just happened, but it's much more high fidelity, meaning that they use the exact lights that are on the space station. They use they input the amount of CO2 that is on the space station, which, by the way, is 10 times what it is here on Earth.
Yeah. Well, that's probably like that.
The plants love it. Indeed, they do. And so that's a higher fidelity test with everything the way it will be on the space station. Then the last thing, and this, of course, is just a brief summary, is the launch. And what happens there is a stowage team that comes along and packs up everything and puts it onto, in this case, a Northrop Grumman Antares rocket, loaded onto a Cygnus capsule. And then it blasts off to the International Space Station. And again, once it gets there, the astronauts take everything out, they unfurl everything and get the experiment started. So that's how it will get there. And I would say that there are probably 2, maybe 3 Antares rocket launches per year. So I would suspect that, given funding right away, we could probably see a launch probably in the first quarter to first half of 2024.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. We're that far along, okay? And, this is not just a fantasy. This is not just a dream. We are actually there. We're moving to a point where we can actually make this happen. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of procuring funding.
Right. Well, speaking of, that's always the big hiccup in any great idea, right? It's how do you pay for it? So what do you need, and how can our viewers and stuff help? I know that um through the our NHA's sister organization, the Hemp Innovation Foundation, we're committed to trying to help you get to your goal. So viewers will be able to go to hempinnovationsfoundation.org and make a donation that is specifically earmarked for your research. But what are your goals in that regard?
Well, we have a funding goal of $270,000, which makes this entire project happen from start to finish. I've always been amazed, when I ask people, what do you think this costs to do this experiment, to put it on an Antares rocket, to get it to the space station, to have the astronauts work for you, to get this growth, a 70-day growth experiment to happen, to harvest the flower, to bring it back to Dewey Scientific, okay, splashed down in the Atlantic. And they always say, what, millions of dollars. And I'm saying, yeah, that's what I thought too. But the cost for us is $270,000 from start to finish, and that's ultimately what we're trying to acquire.
All right. So anybody listening, if you got a few dollars you can spare to help make this happen, we would certainly appreciate you, heading over to hempinnovationsfoundation.org and making a tax deductible donation to help get hemp in space, and the things that could be discovered by doing this could have major impacts across a lot of different sectors. I mean, obviously the hemp industry in general, and thinking that there could be more to growing particularly cannabinoid hemp than just extracting CBD oils. That this could actually be a foundation for a new green kind of biofuel revolution is pretty remarkable, and something attainable. Like it sounds like that we would be able to do that, because am I correct in assuming that the technologies that we would need to convert the terpenes into these types of fuels exists already, or is very close to being able to exist, and is it a question of getting that technology to scale, or what further needs to be done to actually produce the biofuels?
Sure. One of the great things about hemp is that, again, 30% of the dry mass of the flower are these oils, okay? But they are out there on the outside of the plant, right, in these glands that I showed you. And so you can imagine hectares and hectares and hectares of, this oil plant essentially ready for harvest. You can get terpenes from other plants. As I mentioned, they exist in almost all plants, okay? But, and as I mentioned, pine needles. Well, how are you going to harvest pine needles, right? You can't take them off the plant. It's very difficult to get them off the ground. So this is a very simple way of getting to oil. It's sort of hanging out there. It's, low-hanging fruit, if you will. And the conversion of the oils to a biofuel is actually quite straightforward, okay? Because there aren't that many things in the oils of cannabis, right? I mentioned terpenes, the cannabinoids, and what are called flavonoids. But for the most part, it is just packed full of terpenes. And so it's a simple extraction process to get to what you need. And the cool thing is that it can simply be added into existing fuels, and this technology is already in existence. Okay, fuel chemists have been working on it for a number of years, but only recently, due to the hemp becoming a legal agricultural product, have we been able to actually start to study the plant itself. So that is what makes this all possible.
Totally amazing, and super exciting. Yeah, definitely want to see this happen. Will the astronauts like give you updates along the way? Like little like here's what the babies look like, 3 weeks in kind of deal.
Yes. So we will work through our implementation partner, Redwire Space. Again, they have that big room with all the monitors on the wall and the uplink communications with the astronauts to the space station. And so we will be able to communicate with the help of Redwire to follow the experiment. They'll take pictures. Part of the experiment is how are the plants doing in space? How are they growing? Do they need more water, et cetera, right? So we'll be able to monitor them as they grow, as they germinate, and before they're harvested. One thing I didn't mention is that we will also be looking at the structure of the actual trichomes themselves. If I can go back here, you can see how these are growing in 1 unit gravity, but we don't know how they're going to grow in space. Okay, are they going to balloon into some big gland, or we just don't know, and that's part of the experiment. So the astronauts will be using an instrument on the space station called spectrum imager, which is like effectively as a microscope that allows them to zoom in even closer to what you're seeing here to look at the structure of the actual trichome itself, how the head has been built by the cells that are the actual synthetic cells for producing the cannabinoids and the terpenes, for example. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we anticipate some really interesting things.
Wow, super, super exciting. Well, yeah, anything that we can do to, obviously we're going to try to get the word out. I hope that our viewers and listeners here are as intrigued by this as I am and are willing to help play a part in making it happen. Is
I
there
agree.
anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to highlight?
Let me see. I think we pretty much covered it all. I think we did a good job. Yeah.
I think we did a pretty good job. I know I'm super stoked for this whole idea, and especially when I first heard about it, it was like I was just thinking just on the medical side maybe that it was just all about the cannabinoids, but the whole terpene aspect of it was what made this really extra exciting for me because like I love cannabinoids, but I got into hemp because of the environmental aspects and looking to have a more sustainable future. And this just might be a really big ticket towards that. And who knows what you might discover in terms of cannabinoids and wellness and potential uses, of things that we just, you don't know what you don't know.
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
So the whole thing is just totally fascinating. And I know I had heard of some previous, like they took seeds to space or something like that, and I wasn't quite sure what that was all about, but this doesn't seem anything like that.
No, this experiment is completely novel. It includes growing the plant from seed through maturity, right? So we have a fully mature, trichome-rich, cannabinoid terpene-rich flower that can be analyzed, and that has not been done yet. So that's really exciting. That's how it separates itself from anything that's been done before.
Yeah, and depending on how this goes and what you discover, this could be the first of many.
Exactly. That's true. It's often the case where there's a successful space flight and you go back and write up another proposal and do it again for sure.
Okay, well, like I said, everybody, like, please, if you're interested in this and want to see it happen, please visit our website. We'll have links to it with this video that you can easily go to and make a donation. And let's put hemp in space.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Mike. I hope you all enjoyed this edition of In Conversation With, and look forward to having you on again and telling us about the success of your research.
That would be awesome. I'd love to come back.
Thank you.